Picture the scene. The afternoon sun shining brightly on the busy streets of Austin, Texas. Pedestrians hustle and bustle through traffic, while cars speed along the avenues. In the midst of this urban chaos, a man named Carl sits in a corner, his worn coat barely keeping out the cold wind. His shoes, worn with age, have seen better days. But, like so many other days, Carl stands there, quiet, with a small sign beside him. Hungry? Any help welcome, written in black marker. Carl's life wasn't always like this. A few years ago, he had a steady job at a small factory. But, over time, came layoffs, medical expenses, and, finally, the news of eviction. Without family to support him, Carl learned to live one day at a time. His world reduced to a few blocks where people passed him by, avoiding eye contact, hurried and indifferent. But that day would be different. As Carl watched the steady stream of cars stopped at the traffic light, something caught his eye. A gleaming Tesla, its gold trim glinting in the sunlight. At first, he didn't think much of it. Luxury cars were common in the area, and their occupants rarely noticed him. But there was something about the car that made him stop and take notice. The driver's window rolled down, and Carl's heart raced. He pulled back a little in disbelief. It couldn't be. Was it Elon Musk? Carl blinked, trying to convince himself he was mistaken. But the tech billionaire's flawless face was right there, staring back at him with unusual calm amid the hustle and bustle of the day. Something inside Carl, a mixture of desperation and courage, spurred him to action. Rising to his feet, he approached the car, each step weighing more than the last. What was he doing? Asking a billionaire for money? But when he reached the car, he gently knocked on the window. His voice shook as he asked, "Can I have $1?" For a moment, silence hung in the air. Carl braced himself for the same wave of indifference he always received. But Musk didn't look away. Instead, he opened the car door and got out, his deep-set eyes trying to make sense of the man in front of him. "What did you say?" Musk asked, his voice curious, without a trace of condescension or amusement. Carl was taken aback. This was not the reaction he had expected. For the first time in years, he felt seen and acknowledged. But there was no going back. Carl had no idea that that simple question, that single dollar, would lead to a moment that would change his life forever. Musk walked over, studying Carl as if he were solving a puzzle. $1? He repeated, almost testing the weight of the words. Then he turned, taking a card from his pocket. But instead of handing over the money right away, he paused, looking at the sign next to Carl. "What's your story? Why are you here?" Musk asked, his voice calm but firm. Carl hesitated, uncomfortable. Most people didn't care about his story. They either gave him a coin without looking, or ignored him completely. But there was something about the way Musk asked that made Carl feel seen, even vulnerable. "I lost my job a few years ago," Carl began, his words stumbling out. "Things just got out of hand. The bills piled up and I couldn't support myself. I've been here ever since." Musk listened intently, absorbing every word. Carl noticed that Musk's gaze lingered on his hat, his strands of hair almost white against the light. For a moment, Carl thought he saw a glint of empathy in Musk's eyes. "You asked for $1, Musk finally said. "But why just $1? Why not ask for more?" Carl was surprised by the question. "I don't know," he admitted after a pause. "I think it's easier to ask for something small. People are more likely to say yes." Musk's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "Interesting," he said, almost to himself. Most people would ask for as much as they could get. Before Carl could respond, Musk leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Do you think $1 would really change anything for you?" he asked. The question hit Carl like a punch. He didn't know how to respond. "Of course $1 wouldn't change my life," he admitted. "But it could mean lunch. A few minutes of relief from the constant hunger that has become my constant companion." Musk walked away again, his expression inscrutable. Then, without warning, he turned and handed Carl a $100 bill. Carl stared at the money, his brain racing. That wasn't just $1. That was a real lifeline. I don't know what to say," Carl stammered, his voice cracking with emotion. But Musk wasn't done. He placed a gentle hand on Carl's shoulder, drawing his attention back. "I want to ask you something," Musk said. "If you could do anything to change your situation, anything at all, what would it be?" Carl had no idea that this question would mark the beginning of a conversation that would change the course of his life. Carl held the $100 bill, his mind torn between disbelief and gratitude. Musk's question hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. "What would I do to change my situation?" Carl repeated, almost to himself. He looked at Musk, whose gaze remained steady, expectant. It wasn't a casual question. It was one that demanded an honest answer. Carl took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. I'd like a fresh start, he finally said. His voice was quiet, but every word carried years of struggle. Find a place to stay, get myself clean, maybe even get a job again. I just need a chance. A real chance. Musk's expression did not change, but his eyes seemed to shine slightly. A fresh start? He echoed, nodding slowly. That's a good answer. Carl felt a pang of doubt. Was it a good answer, or just the only one he could think of? But before he could get lost in uncertainty, Musk leaned back in the car, crossing his arms as if preparing for a serious discussion. What's stopping you? He asked. Carl hesitated. The answer was obvious, but saying it out loud felt like admitting defeat. Money, he said simply. And the system. It's hard to dig yourself out of a hole when you've fallen that far. Musk tilted his head, considering this. You're not wrong, he said after a moment. The system isn't designed to help people like you. It's designed to keep things the way they are. Musk paused, his gaze sharpening. But if you had the resources, just enough to get yourself up and running, do you think you could make it work? Carl's throat tightened. The question was as challenging as it was hopeful. I think so, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I try. I wouldn't waste the chance. Musk studied Carl for a moment, then smiled slightly. That's what I like to hear, he said. Carl wasn't sure what to make of Musk's cryptic answer, but before he could ask, Musk continued. You know, Carl, most people think success is about great ideas and luck. And sure, those things help. But most of the time, it's about persistence. Getting up every time you get knocked down. Musk paused, his smile widening. Looks like you've had a lot of practice with that. Carl laughed softly, the sound more bitter than amused. Yes, I guess you could say that. Musk's smile grew a little wider. Good. Because persistence is the one thing money can't buy. And it's the thing that matters most. The words hit Carl harder than he expected. He had spent so long feeling invisible, defined by his failures, that he had almost forgotten the strength it took just to get through each day. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of something he hadn't dared hope for: pride. Musk straightened, his tone changing slightly. Here's the deal, he said, his voice firm but not harsh. I'm going to give you more than just money. I'm going to give you a chance, a real chance. But it's up to you to take it. Carl's heart raced. What do you mean? He asked. Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Carl, who stared at the sleek, minimalist design. There was no company logo, just a phone number and the name Elon Musk. Call this number tomorrow, Musk said. Tell them I sent you. They'll know what to do. Carl's hands shook as he held the card. I don't understand. What are you offering me? A job, Musk said simply. A place to start. But whether you take it or not is entirely up to you. Carl felt a lump in his throat. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. The possibilities were both exciting and terrifying. Musk took a step back toward his car, but before he got in, he turned and said, Don't waste this, Carl. Opportunities like this don't come around often. With that, he drove off, leaving Carl standing on the sidewalk, holding the card that could change everything. That night, Carl sat under the dim light of a street lamp, staring at the card in his hand. The name and number seemed almost unreal, as if they would disappear if he blinked. Doubts crept into his mind. Was this some kind of test? A joke? People like Elon Musk didn't hand out opportunities like that, especially to people like him. But as the night wore on and the streets quieted, another thought arose. A rare glimmer of hope. What if this was real? What if Musk had seen something in him that was worth believing in? Carl gripped the card tightly, his resolve solidifying. He had nothing to lose. The next morning, Carl found a payphone outside a gas station. The receiver was stretched and the buttons were blank, but it worked. His heart raced as he dialed the number on the card, each ring amplifying his anxiety. After a few rings, a professional voice answered. Elon Musk's office. How may I help you? Carl hesitated, his tongue heavy in his mouth. This is real. This is really happening. He forced himself to speak. My name is Carl. Mr. Musk gave me this number. He said you'd know what to do. The woman on the other end wasted no time. Sure, Carl. Mr. Musk mentioned you. Can you come to our office downtown tonight? Carl nodded, his distrust giving way to hope. Yes, I can. Great. See you then. The line went dead. Carl stared at the phone in his hand, his mind whirling with questions. What awaited him in this office? He had no idea, but he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. Exactly at night, Carl walked to a bright building in the center. He felt out of place in his shabby clothes, but no one looked when he entered the elevator. When the doors opened on the 15th floor, he was greeted by a young woman with a warm smile. "Mr. Carl?" she asked. He nodded, speechless. "This way," she said, leading him down a spotless hallway. In the end, Carl found himself in a conference room with large windows overlooking the city. And there, sitting at the head of the table, was Elon Musk. "Carl?" Musk said, standing up to greet him. "I'm glad you came." Carl sat up slowly, still unsure if this was all real. Musk wasted no time. "Here's the deal," he began, sliding a folder across the table. "Inside is a job offer. It's an entry-level position at one of my facilities. Nothing glamorous, but it's a start. You'll have a steady paycheck and access to resources to help you get back on your feet." Carl opened the folder, his hands shaking. Inside was everything Musk had described, a lifeline in black and white. He couldn't believe it. "Why are you doing this?" Carl asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "Why me?" Musk sat back, his expression thoughtful. "Because I've been where you are, Carl. Not on the streets, but at rock bottom. Wishing, not knowing what the future would bring. Someone gave me a chance, and it changed everything. Now I'm giving you the same chance." Carl felt tears welling up in his eyes. He wasn't used to this, kindness, compassion. He wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded, holding the briefcase as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. "Don't let me down," Musk said, his voice firm but encouraging. Carl left the office feeling something he hadn't felt in years: hope. This wasn't just a job, it was a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. Carl's life began to change the next day. He showed up at the address listed in the folder, a huge Tesla factory outside Dallas. The hum of machines filled the air, and for the first time in years, Carl felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He was given a uniform, introduced to a team, and trained for his role assembling components for electric vehicles. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Carl threw himself into it. The first few weeks were tough. His body ached from standing for hours, and his hands struggled to adapt to the precision required. But he kept going. Each paycheck felt like a small victory, a step closer to regaining his dignity. He rented a modest room in a shared house and saved every penny he could. Slowly but surely, Carl was rebuilding his life. Word of his story began to spread throughout the factory. His coworkers, initially skeptical of the man who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, began to warm up to him as they saw his determination. Carl became a source of inspiration, proof that second chances were real and worth fighting for. But Carl's transformation didn't stop there. One night, as he sat in his small room, counting his savings, he thought of the countless others still trapped in the same situation he had been in. The thought consumed him. He knew what it was like to feel invisible, to believe that no one cared. He couldn't just move on and forget about them. Using some of his savings, Carl began visiting shelters around the city, bringing hot meals and supplies. He would sit with the people there, listening to their stories, sharing his own, and reminding them that change was possible. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And the more he gave, the more his purpose solidified. Months later, Carl got an unexpected call. It was Elon Musk. "I've been following you, Carl," Musk said, his voice warm. "You've done a great job. Better than I expected." Carl smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you." Musk paused before continuing. "I hear you've been helping other people. That's impressive. It shows character. I want to offer you something more." Carl's heart raced. "More?" "Yes," Musk said simply. "I want you to lead an initiative I've been considering. One focused on workforce development for people who have hit rock bottom. You would help identify candidates, mentor them, and guide them towards sustainable careers. You would be the bridge for others, just as I was for you." The offer left Carl speechless. He thought back to the day he'd approached Musk's car, desperate for $1. The man he'd been then and the man he was now had seemed worlds apart. But this new opportunity? It was a chance to turn his pain into purpose on a scale he'd never imagined. "I'd be honored," Carl said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. The next chapter of Carl's life began that day. He was no longer just a man surviving. He was a man thriving and helping others do the same. His story became a beacon of hope, proving that one act of kindness could spark transformation not just in one person, but in an entire community. The years passed and Carl's impact only grew. The initiative that Musk had entrusted to him, now called Second Spark, has become a national program. It connected thousands of people, those who had been ignored and discarded by society, with resources, training, and jobs that allowed them to rebuild their lives. Carl traveled the country, meeting people who reminded him of himself, sharing his story, and proving that hope was not just a lofty ideal, but a lifeline. Carl never forgot the moment that started it all. A simple question to a man in a sleek electric car. That one question set off a chain of events he could never have foreseen. But the story wasn't just about him. It was about the people he helped, the lives he touched, and the idea that even in the darkest moments, there was potential for light. One day, during an event celebrating the program's 5th anniversary, Carl stood on stage, addressing a crowd of graduates. They were people from all walks of life, former immigrants, single mothers, veterans, and countless others who had been given a second chance. When Carl spoke, his voice was steady but filled with emotion. 5 years ago, I asked a man for $1, he began, his words deliberate. But what he gave me wasn't money, it was an opportunity. And with that opportunity, I realized something. No matter how far you've fallen, no matter how invisible you feel, there is always a way back. You just need someone to believe in you. The audience erupted in applause, but Carl wasn't done yet. What I've learned is that kindness, when combined with action, can change everything. We all have the power to lift someone up. It doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes it's as simple as asking a question or giving someone a chance. As Carl walked off stage, he caught Musk's eye in the audience. His signature smile spread across his face. Musk walked over, shaking Carl's hand firmly. "You did good, Carl," Musk said, his voice full of pride. Carl smiled, his eyes shining. "We did good." When the event ended, Carl stood quietly, taking it all in. The journey from a homeless man with nothing to his name to becoming a leader of a movement was unimaginable. But it was a reminder that life's greatest transformations often begin with the simplest moments. Carl's story became a testament to the power of resilience, kindness, and opportunity. It was proof that one act of courage, reaching out for help, could spark an explosion of change that would impact countless lives. If this story touched you, remember that we all have the ability to make a difference, no matter how small the gesture. Share this story, reach out to someone in need, or take a step toward your next opportunity. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of hope and connection.